here's a full stringing and hitting review of the Yonex Astrox 88S and D Pro. So I'm going to go through my experience of stringing it alongside my feelings of both rackets here. So this is a follow-on video from my previous mini review, so if you've not seen that, I would suggest you checking that out first before coming back to this video. It is up here and in the description below. So after spending quite a few hours with both rackets, I can honestly tell you I hands down 100% prefer the Astrox 88D Pro, and I'll get into why that is later on in the video. So the Astrox 88S Pro has a different stringing pattern compared to its previous generation. So it's lost all its single pass grommets on the 2 and 10 o'clock from the previous generation, and it now ends up with shared grommets. So for consistency, I strung both rackets on the 66 Ultimax at 27 pounds in tension for the mains and 29 pounds tension on the crosses to make my usual 28 pounds. So this is what they sound like after stringing compared to the latest X-Bolt 63 string strung on the same tensions. However, something that doesn't necessarily stand out immediately when you look at a completely strung Astrox 88S Pro is the changes or the gaps in between each string along the racket. And this happens for both mains and cross strings as well. So let me show you what I mean. So on typical Yonex rackets, you can see the gaps in between each string are pretty consistent. So for example, on my Arc Saber 10, the gap in between the main strings are typically somewhere between 7.2 to 7.8 millimeters and 8.4 to 9 millimeters for the crosses, consistent across the whole racket except for the first or last two strings, as you're not supposed to really hit the shuttle there anyways. So if we now look at the 88D Pro, so this is somehow less exaggerated compared to the 88S Pro later on, where the gaps for the main strings are somehow consistent between 7.2 to 8 millimeters, but the cross strings around the center region of the racket are bigger, and the gaps are around 9.4 to 9.9 millimeters. It then goes down to under 8 millimeters around 2 and 10 o'clock section, and going back down to 9 millimeters around the very top and bottom of the racket. So if we look at the 88S Pro, so the center area of the main strings are around 8.5 to 9.5 millimeters, which is already larger than the cross strings gap for my Arc Saber 10, and they're also very similar to the cross strings for the 88D Pro. But for the last 5 main strings on both sides, the gap goes down significantly to 5.8 to 6.5 millimeters, so very obvious reduction in gaps. For the crosses around the center region, they are around 9.5 to 9.8 millimeters, so very similar to the 88D Pro in that regard. The difference in gaps for the main strings for the 88S Pro created somewhat a minor inconvenience for me, using my 5-prong stringing clamps, as it is a tight squeeze sometimes when the distance in between the gaps are changing. So this issue might not be present for stringers who are stringing with 4-prong stringing clamps, such as the ones found on Yonex or Toyozuki machines. So once you're done stringing both rackets and have them stenciled with the logos, they look very good and the gaps instantly doesn't feel that big anymore. So let's get on to the hitting part. And wow, the Astrox 88S Pro is fast. And remember, my usual racket is the Arc Saber 10, which is an even balance racket, and the 88S Pro doesn't even feel head heavy at all in this situation. So maybe it's the difference between the 3U Arc Saber 10 and 4U 88S Pro, but you really literally feel this racket glide through the air with a buttery swing. So this has been the same for all rackets with a full recess profile, such as the Nanofly 800 and Astrox 100ZZ, which its review is coming soon, so do remember to subscribe for that. So the sample I have for the Astrox 88S Pro is a 4U G5 model, and it just feels very responsive. And remember what I said about the increased gaps in between the strings. So you can certainly feel the sweet spot on this thing is a lot bigger than the traditional design, which makes the racket super easy to play with. The increased gaps in between the strings are designed to allow more movement on the string to increase contact time with the shuttle. So don't worry too much if you find your strings out of place after a rally, just move them back and you'll be alright. So currently I have yet to have a string break on me, but I have a sneaky feeling that the durability of the strings might be slightly less than a usual design, due to the slightly wider gaps and lower density of strings in the sweet spot area, especially if you're a big slicer. So defensively and counter-attacking wise, this thing is crazy fast and an absolute joy to play with. Anything mid-court, front court, and you are going to be absolutely all over the shuttle. Defensive blocks, lifts, drives and net shots were all amazing and can be played with relative ease. However, an area where it is lacking quite significantly is the raw power at the rear court. And the funny thing is, the hitting feeling is as nice when you're at the rear, court clearing or smashing, as you are mid-court counter-attacking. Sound-wise, you really can't tell you're lacking power, but I was able to feel that it did not have the raw bite and oomph on the shuttle when you are in the rear court. So when I swapped onto the 88D Pro, and this instantly is another beast. It is stiffer, and I instantly felt that the racket was longer, although it was only 5mm difference from swinging it around, and the head was also heavier, but it is not slow. Swings aren't as fast as the 88S Pro, but still buttery smooth. But here's the big difference. This thing feels so solid and steady when you're hitting with it. It carries lots of power, and easy power that is, and a lot of bite into the shuttle. So surprisingly or unsurprisingly, shots are amazingly steep. Just a completely different racket to the 88S Pro. My hitting partner also mentioned there was a significant weight difference in the shots that were coming from me from both rackets, with the 88D Pro's shots a lot heavier and weighty compared to the 88S Pro. So the 88D Pro is 100% hands down my favorite racket out of the two. Sweet spot wise, I thought the 88D Pro is slightly smaller than the 88S Pro, but it is in line with all of Yonex's high-end rackets, so no problem there. Defensively, you can certainly feel it is slightly slower compared to the 88S Pro, but not slow by any standards whatsoever. However, when you get into the power shot situations, this thing will come alive and reward you with plenty of amazing easy power, helped by its smooth swing and stiffer construction compared to the 88S Pro. So both rackets are really nice and easy to play with, the 88S Pro being faster and more user-friendly, but the 88D Pro being more solid, steady and powerful of the two. So if I had one thing to say, it would be the 88S Pro felt like it was sometimes too fast for its own good. There's a difference in timing in between the two rackets, and the 88S Pro is way ahead in terms of timing for your shots. However, I have to add that I only felt these differences because I was able to swap between both rackets during my testing. If you're only playing with one of them, you might not be able to find this as an issue. So what are your thoughts on both rackets? Have you tried them yet? Put them down in the comments section below. Thanks again to YC Sports for sending me these samples. Go check them out, links in the description below, along with a discount code too. I will see you in the next one.
About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know.